You don't chase differentiation based on what everybody wants to see. When I was younger, I had a skateboard, but I also had like 5 brothers and sisters. And so my parents didn't have money for like to buy me a new skateboard, but there were these kids who sucked at skateboarding. They just loved the culture, I guess. And so they always had new stuff. Anyway, these kids would be like, they'd be buying the new stuff, right? And trying to fit in, and it just doesn't work very well. And these big corporations are kind of like that. What's up, guys? So it's Friday, and I thought I'd look at a few things, weird takes on LinkedIn and see what I can come up with. And good news, I found one. So this guy Todd is talking about branding, and I'm like, people shouldn't talk about branding unless they know what they're talking about. But this pipe will not stay lit. The issue, so what he's saying here is the brand that owns the problem owns the customer. And I'm like, I will say that when I did my research on the creative process at the University of Oregon, I already knew. I came in, I'm like, you know what, creatives are creativity is problem minded, and that means that we want to understand the problem, and because if you understand the problem, you can give a good message. There's tension there, there's a story there, right? And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, cool, but even on its face, I'm like, that's not true about branding. And he says differentiation is the result, not the goal. And he talks about chasing differentiation, which to me is like, right here. Which to me is like, yeah, you don't chase differentiation. That's not even how it works, man. That's not even how branding agencies do it. All right, I should make a distinction. Because there's some branding agencies that they go out. Like think about like a Coca-Cola is probably going to go out and say like, hey, we're a big company. We have to answer to shareholders and we have to maintain that shareholder value, profitability, and all that. And so they're probably going to be like, what do the people want? We already have our brand. What do the people want? And they're willing to sell out quite a bit, right? Whenever you have a profit motive, you're willing to sell out a lot more. If that's what he's talking about, he's right. Because you don't chase differentiation based on what everybody wants to see. That's kind of like being that kid. When I was younger, I had a skateboard, but I also had like 5 brothers and sisters. And so my parents didn't have money for like to buy me a new skateboard, but there were these kids who sucked at skateboarding. They just loved the culture, I guess. And so they always had new stuff. Now this is the 80s, so it was like Bones Brigade was huge. Lance Mountain, Steve Caballero, I guess. Anyway, all these guys, right, that are like Mike Lucero, and of course Tony Hawk when he was like, a teenager. So anyway, these kids would be like, they'd be buying the new stuff, right, and trying to fit in, and it just doesn't work very well. And these big corporations are kind of like that. These big corporations, a lot of them competing with smaller companies. The smaller companies are like, man, they're the realest, right? They're the real thing. And these big companies are a lot of times the posers. They're the rich posers. When Intel started getting too big for its britches and started making cameras and stuff, right? It's just not the same because we don't believe them, right? They're a corporation. It's like, they don't love cameras, man. They don't love them. And a lot of times these big brands are like that. These big brands are the posers. They're the ones who nobody wants to be like. And this guy right here, Todd something or another, and I'll just leave it at Todd because he's the author of something. I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to, embarrass him too much, but not like anyone's going to see this, but the issue here is he has it upside down. He's totally leaving out brand. He's acting like brand is this thing that can't be defined. Oh, you don't want to chase differentiation. So I'll tell you how it works. You don't chase differentiation for the first couple of years. For the first couple of years as a small company, Even if you're a thought leader, you want to differentiate. You want people to pay you for what you're really good at. But you don't have to define that yet. You don't chase it. You say, hey, here are the problems, here are our strengths. You might do a SWOT analysis, which is really the beginning of differentiation. And you're saying, here's what we're really good at. Here's what our culture is good at. And you take that and then you continually solve problems where you're like, hey, we have a unique insight into how this problem can be solved. You do that over and over again enough. And now you're, 5 years later, you're like, hey, it's time for a rebrand. And you're right, because now you know who you are. And now you're not chasing differentiation like this guy says. It's like this guy hasn't experienced branding. It's like he talked to AI and AI told him how to think. And then this is what we get. And it's really nice. Look, it's highlighted. It's great. Look at that. This looks professional. It's well designed, I think. But what he's talking about, though, the place where he makes a lot of sense, though, is where he's right. Is that he's bringing emphasis to the problem. When you bring the emphasis to the problem, now you connect with the customer on their terms. And this is the creative strategy process, right? What he's talking about is how do you win on the product level? How do you win on the service level? Not how do you win on the brand level? And he's saying you back into it. And in a way, he's right. It's just the way he's talking about it is just disconnected. It's just like, dude, get some experience and then come back and talk about this some more. Because I think he has good instincts probably. And it looks like he has gray hair. But I'm not hearing experience in what this guy's saying. And so what he gets right, though, is that the campaign, right? At the campaign level, you start a business and you want that central one thing you want to focus on, even when you're starting a business. Use campaign thinking. Use the creative strategy process, because what it's going to do is it's going to say, like, there's a place for everything, and then you build it out as you go. So there's a place for everything. Here's what I mean. When you sell something and you want to own the problem, then what you want to do is you want to say, okay, well, what are we naturally good at? And what is our products or services? How do they apply really well? How do we position? How are we positioned? And he's leaving that out here. He's totally de-emphasizing position. But position is important because they have to believe that you can solve the problem, that you're the one to do it. And so you find your positioning in this particular campaign. It could be a product. You take that product and you say, what is our product? Why is our product different? And how we deliver it. Our service different, how we deliver it. And then you say, okay, well, then who therefore is going to be our best customer? And why would they pay more for our solutions so that we don't have to sell as hard? So we don't have to just be like, yes, we're yet another one. We'll just lower our prices. No, you don't want to do that, right? You want people to buy from you for what you're good at. And so you say, what makes us different? How do we match up against the competition? And then, and what stands out? And who's going to pay for that? And so now you have what you're offering, who it's for. And then now that you know who it's for and what you're offering, you can say, well, then why do they care? And that's where you turn your product or service into a benefit. And so you're not just saying we do this, you're saying you get this. So we're not saying like, hey, we provide superior this or whatever, or here's our process. You're not starting with that. You're starting with, hey, you have a problem, just like he's saying here. You have a problem. We understand what it is. And we're going to talk about only that problem. And that's why he's kind of right. Because even though he doesn't seem to understand brand at all or how it fits in, the way he's talking about it is just awkward. Like he can't connect everything yet. He hasn't connected it all yet. But he's right. What it is, who's it for, and why the hell do they care? That is what you're going after. And once you have those three things, you have what's called a creative brief that you can turn into a 1 to 2 page creative brief. And ambiguity cannot hide in 1 to 2 pages like that, like it can in 20 pages. So now you have this creative brief. And now you can start developing creative concepts that can connect with these people because you know what they need to hear. You know what they need to hear to get them to think and feel differently. And you take that and then you create that media plan and just say, well, then where does it live, right? And then you measure it. And now you have a campaign. It's pretty simple. And that's why he's right, because you're focusing on the problem. So let me say that again. We're trying to figure out with the creative strategy process, it gives you what it is we're selling, who's it for, and why does it matter? What do they need to hear in order for them to understand that, the message? And then where do we put it all? And then how do we measure it to make sure that our strategy is working? And so that's how you prototype a strategy. And so he's wrong and he's right. Doesn't understand brand, doesn't seem to understand how it works, but does seem to understand at least one way to go about it, which is you create a campaign based on a problem and then you back into your brand. And I think if I'm being generous, that's what he's saying. Let's see what else we got. All right, so the funny thing is, you know who understands brand more than that last guy is someone who understands the problem. And the problem with brands a lot of times is culture. And so he's saying my last encouragement before the weekend is this: you can't expect your team to live out values that you don't. And he probably doesn't realize he's talking about branding, but he is. And so I heard Andrew speak at a conference recently, and he's just a brilliant guy, and I love what he's doing. And it's Red Balloon, which is, you know, the whole goal, the whole differentiation Red Balloon has is we're not trying to hire people to fit some, you know, it's not a DEI type thing. It's not, it's like, how do we get work done? How do we hire people who want to work and are proud of work, who will invest in it? People who will, it's just kind of a no nonsense approach. Just like, how do we get back to the old ways of just doing good work? And when we stop worrying about, you know, there's a big backlash against HR teams. And I've had good experience with HR. I've had, you know, bad experiences, but what he's talking about here though, is just like, hey, you have to live out the values and mindset you want your team. You want in your team yourself. There's no room for rules for thee, but not for me, if you want your business to last. And here's why he's right. I'm working on a research project, just wrapping it up for a rebrand for a accounting firm. And what I'm finding is, you know, like we went into the research and they're like, oh, this is a really good brand. You know, it's solid and there's just something about it, you know, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure there is, but you know what? I'll be the judge of that because I'm the one doing the research. And to me, truth is more important than anything. And if we find out they're a sucky brand or that they have these weaknesses they think are strengths, I'm going to tell them because I'm going to find it out in the research because people are going to be honest with me. And so that's cool. But what I found out was this culture really is an awesome culture. And the culture is outpacing the brand. And the culture is, you know, awesome. The culture is outpacing the brand, which is good because now what you're doing is you're like, hey, we have our culture figured out. We have a lot of things figured out, and this is great. So now let's figure out how to talk about it. And there's this in Christianity, there's this idea that, you know, preach the gospel, use words when necessary. And I know what they mean because what they're saying is don't be a hypocrite. You know, do the things that a Christian does. Love your enemy. You know, take care of people. You know, create excellence, you know, in your surroundings, do your best work, you know, character and all those things, right? All those things. And then, you know, use words when necessary. And I'm just like, that's misguided because what you need to show people and then you need to know how to talk about it because people are going to learn your why way faster because they can't always tell your why by what you do unless you have to teach them how to think right. And they have to see so many interactions before they start seeing like, oh, here's their why, right? They don't know how to talk about you. They don't know how to refer you because they don't have language yet. And so what you're doing is you're doing good things and they're like, oh, they're a great company. You don't even know they're so great, you know, and you're like, cool. But unless you can tell me, I don't really know how to express that. And so I don't know as a client how to refer you to other people as well as if I'm like, I know why they do what they do. And I can see a pattern, but then they've also articulated their pattern. They have branded themselves to the point where I like them and I trust them. And then they've given me thought leadership that shows competence and shows me how to think. I am now smarter and more sophisticated than I was before this brand came along because they brand well and they've led thinking well, thought leadership. And so what I love about what Andrew is saying here is that you do the thing before you claim to be the thing. And that's a huge advantage for smaller companies. That's how smaller companies are. We just talked about skateboarding in the last one. The smaller company is the kid without as much money, but who's like the respected skateboarder. You're not the one who's out there like, because your parents are rich, they can buy you all the cool stuff. They can buy you all the Bones Brigade, shirts and everything. And like some of us were poor, and we love skateboarding. We love the culture, but we couldn't just jump from thing to thing, phase to phase, because we just couldn't afford it. Right. So what this is talking about is like smaller companies have an advantage because you can be who you are and you can own that identity. Whereas bigger companies, private equity backed corporations, they have that profit motive, man. And they're going to make long-term sacrifices. They're going to sell out their brand quicker because they're trying to make that next quarter earning. So that's what I love about Andrew. I love that about him because he knows what he stands for. And what does it say? I help culture first businesses hire, but culture first. He gets it, right? Hire better, cheaper, and for the long haul. He's the CEO at Red Balloon. So love this guy. Love that thinking. It's the truth, like live and trade on truth, man. Let's see what else we got. All right. So this one's going to be a shout out to my old agency. This is Resound. And Jason is a servant leader, I guess. But anyway, he's the SEO guy, super smart dude. They just went to a conference. And what I'll tell you about Resound is this guy, Mike, you see right here, he's a kind of a natural brand guy. And he's kind of made sense, helped me make sense of branding. When I first showed up, I was more of a process guy, like the creative strategy process. When I joined Resound, it was me and Mike. When I became the operations manager at that point, it was just me and Mike, right? And we would go out, we'd do brand workshops, and it was awesome. And then Sam joined up, and he's the guy you saw a little earlier. And we became just this awesome team. And what I saw there was because Mike, this guy right here, he just believes there has to be substance. What they believe is that people are made in the image of God. And this Sam right here, he's the COO, and he's kind of the third, guy who came on, and we really started making money when Sam joined because he could do the work really well. And so we had that, like, Mike was just this brand, just naturally understood brand. Sam is just so good at making stuff, just getting it done. And then I was a little more on the strategy side. And so I was unblanking the page, making things that haven't been made before, and then I handled operations and process. So what I love about Resound is they're such a they're a really authentic company, right? They're that company that's like, hey, let's find out the truth. And so when I went in there to those brand workshops and I'm like, you guys, we have to get to the truth of this, Mike was already ahead of me on that. And so he was backing me up. And so he led the workshop, and then I would kind of like, I would help with the workshop, like organizing values, traits, and things like that these executives would write down and put on the board. And so this is kind of one of those places, kind of formative for me, because Mike was so natural with branding and then backed up this idea of truth in branding. And I still remember one time went to this conscious capitalism conference that was so hot for a while. And Simon Mainwaring was there, and he's a brand guy, right? but he's the kind of guy who you go in and you pay him a bunch of money, and then he goes and he's like, okay, well, let's find out what people want to hear. And then, oh, there's a parade out there. Give me enough money and I'll put you in front of them and make it look like you've been leading the parade the whole time. So anytime culture changes or anything like that, it's guys like that, not Resound, but guys like that end up helping you just buy audiences and buy credibility. And if you have enough money, you're good to go. With Resound, what we did was the opposite. We're like, hey, who are you really? And then let's find out then, who does it make sense? Let's define that really well so people know why they're buying from you. They know why. And then we took that, we turned that into thought leadership based on how they differentiate. And so we created content strategies, which I got to be a part of. I kind of led that part of it. And we were able to create some things that are really cool. And so I'll see what else we got. All right, let's just end on Resound, because here's a really cool thing we did. So this conference, right? This conference that they just went to, and by the way, Margot's cool. I've worked with her before. One of the cool things about Resound is I remember. So we published this report, right? Let me just bring it up. Let's see. Remarkabrand.com. All right, shout out to my buddies. All right, so here's the report. So what we did was we did a survey of the whole industry, and I got to be the lead researcher on this. First when I was an employee, and then when I left, I'm still the lead researcher on this. And here's here's some reports that we created, and I was so my role was to get the data brought in, and then to get the data visualizations created, and then to find, so I had to find like work out data sources, clean up the data, make sure it's reflecting things properly, because I have my background is the qualitative and quantitative research methods in grad school. And so what these guys did was they, so when I first started, Mike was like, here, let me relight. Here, let me take a breath. So Mike first had this idea, and it was like, he's like, hey, I'm going to get an intern to grab a bunch of data for this report I want to do for the accounting industry. And I'm like, yeah, do what you want. I was the COO and integrator at the time. But I was busy. We're all busy. And so I'm like, dude, like, do what you want. We're all busy. And so, and then it came fall time, and it was time to actually publish the report or start really working on it. And I'm like, COO. So I'm like, I'm not paying for people to look at 1,500 accounting firms, and do all this stuff. So I'm like, what can we just scrape from the internet? What information can we grab? And so I started doing some of the automation, making sure the data was clean in spreadsheets and everything like that. And then pretty soon we moved to using BigQuery. So this data, what is it, a data warehouse, I guess. Google BigQuery and actually storing the information properly. And then I got my buddy from Local Motors, Cody Sellers, and he's a data engineer at Snowflake, and I was able to get him to join the project and help us with the storage of the data, the SQL and everything. And so we ended up bringing it across the finish line. And then Sam, the guy I showed you earlier, let's see if we can find his picture. Smart Tech report is what that is. Martech. Yeah, we did the Martech report too. There's Mike. Where's Sam? Need to see Sam, man. That's not Sam. That's one of their clients. Let's see. There's Sam. Yeah. So Sam made it look beautiful. Like, he's the one who makes everything look awesome. And so, I guess in a way we're competitors now. Like, I'm sort of in competition with Resound, but we just have such different levels. Like, I'm not going to be able to design stuff the way he is. And I don't have the brand understanding that Mike does. And you get pretty good at branding after a while, but Mike is still the guy. And so, so the team there is really awesome. And so, So we ended up creating creating the Remarkabrand Index, and it's been so successful in helping Resound kind of take over the accounting industry. And I can tell you more about that if you want, but these guys are great. And just a shout out to these guys. It was super fun. I'm super privileged to still be able to work on that, even though I'm not working there anymore as an independent contractor. And but it's been amazing because they go to Summit and they're just like, hey, here's the index, and now everybody, all these accounting marketers like Margot here, they're just like, we want to know where we stand. We want to know where our brand stands. And so, very cool, genius move on Mike's part. And but the cool thing though is that these guys are legit. They're the real deal. Mike, Sam, Aaron, all these guys are awesome. And so shout out to these guys. All right, my pipe is gone, so I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to go hang out because it's pizza night at home, and I'm looking forward to that. So I'll talk with you guys next time. Have a good weekend.